Hi, my name is Grandma Betty, and welcome to Grandma Betty's Recipes, the place where we dig up the foods, the flavors, and the kitchen wisdom that built this country and somehow got left behind when convenience took over the grocery store. Somewhere between 1973 and today, Americans made a deal with the devil. We handed over our cast iron skillets, our crocks of fermenting cabbage, our pots of simmering bone broth, and in exchange, we got neon-colored yogurt tubes, fat-free everything, and vitamin supplements that cost $40 a bottle.
We called it progress. Our grandmothers called it foolishness. And honestly, the older I get, the more I think Grandma was right about pretty much everything, including the food, chicken, liver, and onions. Let me tell you something about chicken livers. If you grew up in a working-class American home in the 1970s, you either loved chicken liver night or you spent dinner trying to feed yours to the dog under the table. There was no middle ground. I was a lover. My husband Danny was a dog feeder. We've been married 41 years and I still haven't forgiven him.
Ounce for ounce, chicken liver is one of the most nutritionally dense foods on this earth. Iron, vitamin B12, folate, vitamin A, and complete protein, all wrapped up in a piece of meat that cost almost nothing at the butcher counter. The preparation was simple.
Dredged in seasoned flour, cooked in a cast iron skillet with sweet caramelized onions in butter or lard. Overcooked liver is a crime, and I will stand by that until my dying day. We replaced it with boneless, skinless chicken breast, a fraction of the nutrition, and honestly, a fraction of the flavor, too. Bone broth. Before bone broth got bottled and sold at juice bars for $9 a cup, it lived in a stock pot on the back burner of every grandmother's stove in America. Nobody called it bone broth back then. They called it stock. Or they just called it what you made on Sunday when the chicken carcass was sitting in the refrigerator looking at you. Throwing away bones in the 1970s would have been considered wasteful to the point of embarrassing. You put them in a pot, covered them with cold water, added vegetable scraps, a few peppercorns, maybe a bay leaf if you were feeling fancy, and let it simmer for hours. The smell alone was enough to make you feel better about whatever was troubling you.
Collagen breaking down into gelatin, minerals leaching from the marrow, amino acids supporting gut lining and joint health in ways no supplement has replicated. You knew it was right when it gelled solid overnight.
We replaced it with sodium-loaded cartons and then spent millions on collagen capsules. Our grandmothers would have laughed until they cried. Homemade lard. Oh, I can already hear the gasping from here. Lard! Betty, are you serious? Yes, I am absolutely serious, and I need you to sit down and hear me out. Lard has been one of the most unfairly maligned foods in American history. Real, home-rendered. Lard contains oleic acid, the same monounsaturated fat found in olive oil. No trans fats. High smoke point. Fat-soluble vitamins, including vitamin D. Then the vegetable oil industry convinced everyone that animal fat was killing them, and we switched to partially hydrogenated oils that were actually loaded with trans fats. The kind that genuinely do cause heart disease. Grandmothers in the 1970s were cooking with a fat that science has since largely vindicated. We replaced it with something that took decades to reveal its true damage. Whole milk.
I grew up drinking whole milk. My children grew up drinking whole milk. My grandchildren, God love them, have been raised in a house that serves 2%, and I try not to take it personally, but I won't pretend it doesn't sting a little.
Whole milk was the standard in every American refrigerator through the 1970s. Full fat, rich, creamy, and delivered by an actual milkman in glass bottles, in many households right up through the mid part of that decade. Children drank it at every meal. It came with school lunches. It was considered essential, not optional. The fat in whole milk carries fat-soluble vitamins, specifically vitamins A, D, E, and K, in a form the body can actually absorb and use. When you strip the fat out to make skim milk, or 2%, you strip out the very delivery mechanism for those vitamins. Skim milk is essentially vitamin-depleted white water, and that is not me being dramatic. That is nutritional reality. Many commercial skim milks actually have synthetic vitamin A added back in after the fact because stripping the fat removes the natural version. Studies that came out after the low-fat craze began showed that children who consumed full-fat dairy had better outcomes across multiple health markers than those who consumed reduced fat versions. The fat in whole milk also creates satiety, meaning it fills you up, meaning you don't need a snack 30 minutes after drinking it. We traded genuine nourishment for diet culture mythology and called it a health improvement. Whole milk deserves to come back to every American table, and I, for one, am doing my small part. Sardines on crackers.
The sardine, nature's most perfect, most affordable, most unjustly neglected superfood. I have been eating sardines on crackers since I was a little girl in my grandmother's kitchen in Ohio, and I will eat them until the good Lord calls me home.
A tin cost next to nothing, required no cooking, and delivered an extraordinary nutritional package. Wild-caught, low in mercury, loaded with omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin B12, vitamin D, calcium from the soft edible bones, and complete protein. On a cracker with mustard, under $2. Outperforms anything in a fancy health food store. We replace sardines with processed deli meat that contains enough sodium to make a cardiologist nervous. The sardine never did anything wrong. Beef liver. Pate. Now here is where things get fancy, 1970s style. Beef liver pate showed up at dinner parties spread on little rounds of toast, usually alongside a Harvey Wallbanger or a glass of white wine that probably cost $3. Those hostesses were inadvertently serving their guests one of the most nutritionally concentrated foods on the planet. Vitamin B12, copper, folate, CoQ10, and complete bioavailable protein, all blended smooth with butter, onions, garlic, a splash of cream, and brandy into something silky, rich, and deeply savory. I have served it at my own dinner parties for years. People ask for the recipe every single time. My advice, don't tell them what it is until after they compliment it. Works every time. Oatmeal from scratch. Not the instant kind, not the little paper packet with the artificial maple flavor and the cartoon Quaker on the front. Real oatmeal, steel cut or old-fashioned rolled oats, cooked slowly on the stovetop with actual attention and actual time.
The beta-glucan fiber in real oatmeal feeds beneficial gut bacteria, slows glucose absorption, binds to cholesterol, and supports immune function. This is not folk medicine. This is established nutritional science.
We have replaced it with instant versions processed so heavily the fiber benefit is largely gone. Then added enough sugar to classify them as dessert. Then packaged them with a toy. And then we wondered why childhood obesity started climbing in the 1980s. Real oatmeal is simple, cheap, and genuinely good for you. There is no excuse. Cabbage soup. Every grandmother made cabbage soup. Every single one. German grandmothers, Polish grandmothers, Irish grandmothers, Southern grandmothers. It didn't matter your background. At some point during winter, a head of cabbage went into a pot and became something remarkable. Cabbage was the cheapest vegetable at the market, and it stretched into a pot that fed a large family for days. What those grandmothers were creating without knowing the science was a powerful, gut-healing, anti-inflammatory meal. Vitamin C, vitamin K, folate, glucosinolates linked to reduced cancer risk, and glutamine that literally repairs the gut wall. We replaced it with $5 smoothies made from 17 exotic ingredients imported from 4 different countries. A head of cabbage cost $1, sometimes less. We just forgot what it was worth. Stewed prunes. I am going to talk about stewed prunes, and I am not going to apologize for it. Not even a little.
In the 1970s, stewed prunes appeared on American breakfast tables with the same regularity as toast and coffee. Older family members ate them without question. Children gagged dramatically.
And everyone over the age of 50 understood exactly why they were there, though we will keep the specifics polite and simply say the prunes were doing important work. But here is what the gagging children didn't understand, and what modern nutrition has confirmed completely. Prunes, whether stewed or dried, are genuinely exceptional food. They are extraordinarily high in sorbitol, which supports digestive regularity. They are rich in vitamin K, which is essential for bone density and calcium regulation. Yeah, they contain boron, a trace mineral that supports bone health in ways that calcium supplementation alone cannot replicate. Studies published in the last decade have actually found that regular prune consumption can measurably increase bone density in older women, which is a more significant finding than most people realize when you consider the scale of osteoporosis in this country. Stewing the prunes, cooking them gently in water with perhaps a slice of lemon and a small amount of sugar until they plumped and softened, also made their nutrients more bioavailable. It was gentle, warming, and the liquid they created was sweet and complex, and actually delicious if you were paying attention. We replaced stewed prunes with fiber supplement powders, stirred into orange juice, and with expensive probiotic supplements that cost $40 a bottle. Your great-grandmother could have told you to just eat your prunes. She would have been right. Buttermilk in the 1970s was either kept in the refrigerator for drinking or used constantly in baking, and in many households it served both purposes simultaneously. True cultured buttermilk, the kind made from fermented dairy rather than the modern acidified versions, was one of the original probiotic foods available to ordinary American families, and it was cheap enough that nobody thought of it as special. That was its tragedy.
Genuine fermented buttermilk contains live bacterial cultures of the kind that colonize and support a healthy gut microbiome. The same gut microbiome that modern research has connected to immune function, mental health, metabolic health, inflammatory response, and about a dozen other bodily systems that we spent decades thinking had nothing to do with digestion. We are now spending enormous amounts of money on probiotic supplements, probiotic yogurts, and fermented foods marketed as revolutionary health discoveries.
Our grandmothers had cultured buttermilk in the refrigerator door for 60 cents a quart and didn't think twice about it. Buttermilk also contains potassium, B vitamins, calcium, and is actually lower in fat than regular whole milk because the butter fat has been removed during churning. It is genuinely versatile, useful in pancakes, biscuits, salad dressings, marinades, and drunk, straight in a cold glass, if you have the taste for it. My grandfather drank a glass of cold buttermilk every single day of his life until he was 89 years old. Correlation is not causation. I know that. But I am just saying, COD liver oil. Oh, the cod liver oil. The great villain of 1970s childhood. The 1 teaspoon of absolute misery administered by a loving but firm parent every morning before school. I took mine with my eyes closed and a glass of orange juice standing by as a chaser, and I resented every single drop of it. I now wish I had thanked my mother instead. Cod liver oil is one of the most concentrated natural sources of vitamins A and D on Earth. In the 1970s, it was given to children as a matter of course in millions of American households, a tradition that stretched back generations, particularly in northern states and among immigrant families from Northern Europe, where vitamin D deficiency from limited winter sun exposure was well understood, even without the scientific vocabulary to describe it precisely.
Vitamin D deficiency is now considered epidemic in the modern United States. It is linked to depression, compromised immune function, increased cancer risk, bone density loss, cardiovascular disease, and inflammatory conditions across virtually every body system. Vitamin A in its natural form as found in cod liver oil, is essential for vision, immune response, and skin health in ways that the beta-carotene found in plants cannot fully replicate for everyone, particularly those with certain genetic variations that limit conversion.
We replaced a spoonful of cod liver oil with synthetic vitamin D supplements that often lack the cofactors needed for proper absorption, and we have somehow managed to be more vitamin D deficient as a nation than we were when children were grimacing over a single spoon of oil every morning. Sometimes the old remedies were old for a reason. Blackstrap molasses. This is one that I feel genuinely passionate about. And I want you to pay attention because blackstrap molasses might be the most nutritionally underrated food that ever sat in an American pantry. Blackstrap molasses is what remains after sugarcane is refined into white sugar. It is the dark, thick, intensely flavored byproduct that carries virtually all the minerals that white sugar lacks. And because it is the final molasses extracted from the refining process, it is extraordinarily concentrated. A single tablespoon of blackstrap molasses contains meaningful amounts of iron, calcium, magnesium, potassium, manganese, selenium, and B vitamins. It is essentially a mineral supplement in edible form that costs about $3 for a jar that lasts a month. In the 1970s, blackstrap molasses showed up in baked beans, in gingerbread, in barbecue sauces, in hot cereal, and stirred into warm water or milk as a tonic that generations of American families used as a home remedy for fatigue and anemia. This was folk medicine that genuinely worked because the iron content is real and significant. We replaced blackstrap molasses with refined white sugar and high fructose corn syrup, both of which provide calories and nothing else. And then we spent money on mineral supplements and iron tablets to address the very deficiencies our grandmothers were quietly preventing with a spoonful of molasses stirred into their Saturday morning baked beans. Add a tablespoon to your oatmeal. You can thank me later. Dried beans from scratch, not the canned kind. I want to be very specific about this.
The canned beans are fine. They will do in a pinch, but the dried beans that soaked in a bowl of cold water overnight and then cooked on the back of the stove all day, those are a different food entirely, and they did something for American health that we have largely walked away from.
In the 1970s, dried beans were a weekly, sometimes daily component of working-class American cooking. A 2-pound bag of dried pinto beans cost almost nothing and could feed a family of 5 for multiple meals. Combined with cornbread or rice, they provided complete protein without requiring any meat at all, which was important in households where the grocery budget required serious management. Beans cooked from dried contain significantly more resistant starch than canned beans because the extended soaking and cooking process preserves and develops starches that behave differently in the body than regular carbohydrates. Resistant starch feeds beneficial gut bacteria, improves insulin sensitivity, and creates satiety in ways that few other foods match. The long cooking also develops flavors that canned beans simply cannot replicate, a creaminess in the bean itself, and a richness in the cooking liquid that turns into something close to gravy if you have paid proper attention. We replaced dried beans with canned beans, and then gradually replaced beans altogether with processed protein bars and shakes that cost $4 each and contain 17 ingredients most people cannot pronounce. A bag of dried pinto beans still costs about $2. The math is not complicated. Beef heart. I understand that this one requires trust. I am asking for your trust. Give me 200 words, and I promise you will come out the other side at least curious. Beef heart was a regular dinner table item in working class and rural American homes through the 1970s. It was cheap because it was unfashionable, not because it was inferior. In fact, nutritionally, beef or hurdy heart is one of the finest things you can put on a dinner plate.
It is pure, dense muscle meat with a flavor more intense than regular beef and a texture that responds beautifully to slow braising. It contains extraordinarily high levels of CoQ10, a compound that every cell in your body requires for energy production and that your body makes less of as you age. It contains B vitamins, zinc, selenium, and complete protein in concentrations that rival or exceed conventional muscle cuts.
In the 1970s, a beef heart purchased from the butcher would be sliced, stuffed with a simple bread stuffing seasoned with onion and herbs, then slow roasted or braised in a covered pot for several hours until tender. The result was a centerpiece dinner that cost a fraction of a roast and delivered nutrition that exceeded it. We replaced beef heart with the expensive center cuts, stripped everything interesting from our plates, and then started buying heart health supplements at the pharmacy. I want you to just sit with that irony for a moment. Homemade sauerkraut, the crock of fermenting cabbage that sat on a grandmother's kitchen counter in the 1970s, was not decoration. It was medicine. It was one of the most sophisticated probiotic preparations available to ordinary American families, and it required nothing more than cabbage, salt, thyme, and a clean jar. Homemade sauerkraut, fermented at room temperature, allows beneficial lactobacillus bacteria to multiply and thrive in an environment that preserves the cabbage for months without refrigeration or canning. The resulting product is alive with bacterial cultures, rich in vitamin C, and contains compounds created during fermentation that the raw cabbage simply does not have. The lactic acid produced during the process has anti-inflammatory properties and creates an intestinal environment that is genuinely hostile to harmful bacteria while being hospitable to beneficial ones. Commercial sauerkraut from a can has been pasteurized, which kills every single beneficial bacterial culture and makes it nutritionally ordinary pickled cabbage rather than living food it was designed to be. This is a crucial distinction that most people have never been told. In the 1970s, families who kept a fermentation crock going year-round, replenishing it as needed, had a constant supply of genuinely functional food that supported immune health and digestive function through the winter months, when illness was most common. They did not do this knowing the science. They did it because their mothers had done it and their mothers' mothers before them. The wisdom was encoded in the practice even when the mechanism wasn't fully understood. Raw carrots with lard, dipped before ranch dressing arrived in its squeeze bottle and colonized every vegetable platter in America, raw carrots got dipped in something far less complicated and, I would argue, significantly more nourishing. A simple dip made from home-rendered lard seasoned with salt, sometimes a little garlic powder and dried herbs, was the vehicle through which fat-soluble vitamins moved from the carrot into the body.
This is not a small nutritional point. Beta-carotene, the compound that gives carrots their color and converts to vitamin A in the body, is a fat-soluble nutrient. It requires dietary fat to be absorbed.
Eating a raw carrot without fat is not the same nutritionally as eating a raw carrot with fat. The fat-soluble vitamins stay largely inaccessible without the fat to carry them across the intestinal wall and into the bloodstream. The grandmothers who served carrots with a fat-based dip were doing something nutritionally correct without knowing the mechanism. Ranch dressing, the replacement, contains industrial seed oils, stabilizers, artificial flavors, and enough sodium and additives to make the original simple dip look almost medicinal by comparison. The carrot did not change. Everything around the carrot got worse. Serve your carrots with something real. Lard, butter, a good olive oil-based dip, anything with genuine fat that will actually let the carrot do its job. Cornmeal mush. Cornmeal mush is perhaps the least glamorous food on this entire list, which is saying something considering we have already discussed cod liver oil and beef heart. But cornmeal mush, cooked slowly on the stovetop from whole grain cornmeal, was a breakfast staple in American farm and working class households through the 1970s that provided a genuinely superior start to the day. Whole grain cornmeal retains the germ and bran of the corn kernel, carrying B vitamins, iron, magnesium, and the kind of complex carbohydrates that burn slowly and provide sustained energy rather than the spike and crash cycle of refined cereals. Cooked into a thick mush with water or milk, seasoned with salt, and served with a knob of butter and perhaps a drizzle of sorghum syrup or molasses, it was filling, warm, and provided genuine fuel for physical labor. In many Southern and Appalachian households, cornmeal mush was also fried. Leftover mush was poured into a pan, allowed to set overnight, then sliced and fried in a cast iron skillet until golden and crispy on the outside and creamy within. Either way, it was honest food with genuine nutritional value that cost almost nothing. We replaced it with corn-based breakfast cereals made from refined cornmeal, stripped of its nutrition, puffed, coated in sugar, and sold in boxes featuring cartoon characters. The corn is still there. Everything good about the corn is gone. Canned salmon patties. This one right here is what I think of as the overlooked champion of the 1970s kitchen. Canned salmon patties, made on Friday nights in households across America, often for the Catholic families who didn't eat meat on Fridays, but also just for any family that needed a filling, affordable, genuinely healthy dinner on a weeknight when time was short and the budget was tighter. Wild-caught Pacific salmon, even in a can, is one of the finest sources of omega-3 fatty acids, complete protein, vitamin D, and astaxanthin, a potent antioxidant that exists in the American food supply. The canned bones, soft enough to eat and often mashed right into the patties, provided a significant and highly bioavailable source of calcium. You were getting muscle food, brain food, and bone food, all from a can that cost under $2. The patties themselves were made simply: drained canned salmon mixed with beaten egg, cracker crumbs, or breadcrumbs, finely diced onion, a little mustard or Worcestershire sauce, formed into patties, and fried in butter or lard in a cast iron skillet until golden and crispy on both sides. Served with a simple white sauce or alongside stewed tomatoes and whatever vegetable was in season. This was a complete meal that delivered nutrition, matching or exceeding expensive fresh fish dinners. We replaced canned salmon patties with fish sticks made from low-quality white fish, then with fast food fish sandwiches made from fish that arrives at the restaurant in compressed frozen blocks of indefinite origin. The salmon was right there, wild-caught, affordable, and extraordinarily good for you. We just stopped buying it. Dandelion greens. Every spring, in yards and fields across America, one of the most nutritionally powerful plants on the continent pushed through the soil and offered itself for free. And somewhere around the 1980s, we decided to spray it with herbicide instead of eat it. The dandelion, the most unfairly persecuted plant in American horticultural history. In the 1970s, particularly in rural communities and among families who maintained the food traditions of their immigrant grandparents, dandelion greens were a spring staple. Young leaves gathered before the plant flowered were wilted in a hot pan with garlic and olive oil, or dressed with a warm bacon vinaigrette, or added to soups and stews. They were eaten with the enthusiasm of people who had survived winter on preserved and stored foods and genuinely needed fresh greens. Dandelion greens contain more beta-carotene than carrots, more calcium than milk by weight, significant amounts of vitamins C and K, iron, and potassium. They contain bitter compounds that stimulate bile production and support liver detoxification. They are mildly diuretic, supporting kidney function. Modern herbalism and nutrition research have both come to the conclusion that the dandelion is, in fact, a medicinal plant that happens to also be food. We replaced wild-gathered dandelion greens with iceberg lettuce, which contains essentially nothing except water and structural fiber, then with pre-washed mixed greens that cost $6 a bag and wilted by Thursday. The dandelion is still out there, growing in fields and lawns and roadsides for free. It has never stopped offering itself to us. We just stopped accepting the offer. Homemade vegetable soup with marrow bones. And here we are at the last one. I saved this one for last on purpose because this is the one that I think about most. The one that I consider the true emblem of everything this video is trying to say. Homemade vegetable soup with marrow bones, the Sunday pot, the I don't feel well pot, the everything's going to be all right pot. In the 1970s, some version of this soup existed in virtually every American home. It started with marrow bones from beef, split by the butcher to expose the rich, fatty marrow inside. Those bones went into a big pot with cold water and a splash of vinegar, which helped draw minerals out into the liquid. They simmered for hours before anything else was added. The broth that developed was golden, trembling with gelatin when you tilted the pot, and smelled like everything that is right about food cooked with patience. Then came the vegetables, whatever was in the garden, whatever was in the cellar, whatever needed to be used before it turned. Carrots, onions, celery, potatoes, barley, or white beans to thicken. A bay leaf you'd remember to remove before serving if you were that kind of person. I am not always that kind of person. This soup was nutrition so complete that generations of families survived illness, raised healthy children, and endured hard winters on this single recipe. The collagen from the bones, the marrow vitamins, the vegetable fiber, and phytonutrients. All of it together created something no combination of modern supplements has ever replicated. We replaced it with canned soup, then carton soup, then powder dissolved in hot water, and then started paying $9 a cup for bone broth from influencers who act like they invented it. The pot is still on your shelf. The bones are still at the butcher. We just stopped making the time. So there they are. 20 foods that kept Americans genuinely healthy in the 1970s, traded away for convenience and shiny packaging and the constant promise that something new was going to do what real food had been doing for centuries. I am not asking you to go back to the 1970s. Lord knows I wouldn't go back to the fashion choices, but pick one thing from this list and bring it back into your kitchen this week. Just one. I'm Grandma Betty, and this is Grandma Betty's Recipes. The best cooking advice is usually the oldest. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.